Once upon a time, in a quiet little village tucked between green hills and winding rivers, there lived an old lady. She wasn't rich, she didn't own much, and her house was small, just enough for one. But she had something that money couldn't buy. She was always smiling, always cheerful, and always at peace. People in the village called her Grandma Joy. Everyone loved her. Whenever someone had a problem, whether it was about love, work, or just feeling lost, they would walk down the dusty road to her cozy home. Her door was always open, and her kettle was always warm. People said that just being near her made their worries feel lighter. One morning, a young man from the village knocked on her door. He was troubled, like many others before him. Grandma Joy welcomed him in, handed him a cup of warm tea, and they sat together by the window, sunlight streaming in. He looked at her and asked, "Grandma, why are you always happy? I see you every day with a smile on your face, even when things go wrong. Don't you ever feel down?" She chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that comes from a place of peace. "My dear," she said, "life is a lot like the weather. Some days are bright and sunny, and others are stormy. But I've learned something important. Happiness doesn't depend on the weather. It comes from inside, from how we choose to look at life." The young man frowned, not quite understanding. "But how can you be happy when bad things happen? Isn't it normal to feel sad?" Grandma Joy nodded. "Of course, it's normal. I've felt deep sadness too. Let me tell you a story from my own life." She paused, looking out the window as if the memories lived in the trees beyond. "When I was younger, I had a husband and 2 beautiful children. We didn't have much, but we had love, and that was more than enough. We'd laugh around the dinner table, sing together, and enjoy the little things. Life felt full." Her voice softened. "But one day, my husband got very sick. We didn't have the money for the medicine he needed. We tried everything, but in the end, he passed away." The young man's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. "It was the hardest moment of my life," she continued. "I cried every night. I felt broken. I thought I'd never feel joy again." She let that sit for a moment before continuing. "But then I looked at my children, and I realized they still needed me. I had 2 choices. I could live in that sadness forever, or I could choose to find a reason to smile again." She turned to the young man. "I chose to smile. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because I wanted to live a life that honored my husband's memory. A life where my children could still laugh. I chose to look for joy again." He was quiet, taking it all in. "But how did you do that?" he asked. "Wasn't it hard to just be happy again?" "Oh, it was," she said, nodding. "It still is sometimes. But I found a little ritual that helped me. Every morning, I wake up and say to myself, today is a new day. Let's find one thing to smile about. Just one thing. It doesn't have to be big." She smiled again, eyes twinkling. "Maybe the sun is shining. Maybe I hear a bird singing. Maybe someone smiles at me. There's always something small to be thankful for." The young man looked down at his tea, deep in thought. "But what if something really bad happens again?" he asked quietly. "What if life just keeps knocking you down?" Grandma Joy leaned in and gently touched his hand. "That's when it matters the most," she said. "That's when I remind myself, nothing lasts forever. Not the good, and not the bad. Pain passes. Storms pass. If I keep focusing on what I still have, my health, my friends, the simple fact that I'm still breathing, I can find a reason to keep going." She paused. "Happiness," she said, "is a choice. A hard one sometimes, but still a choice. You can focus on the darkness, or you can search for the light." The young man sat quietly for a while, soaking in her words. Then he stood up and gave her a small smile. "Thank you," he said. "I think I understand now." He left her little house with a new perspective, holding on to her words like a lantern in the dark. And from that day forward, he tried to live like Grandma Joy. Every morning, he looked for one good thing, no matter how small. Sometimes it was the sound of wind in the trees. Sometimes it was a kind word from a stranger. Other times, it was just the feeling of waking up and knowing he had another chance. And slowly, almost without realizing it, his life began to change. Even when things went wrong, he didn't spiral into sadness like before. He stayed grounded, grateful, hopeful. The villagers began to notice the change in him. They asked him what happened, and he shared Grandma Joy's story. Word spread, and soon more and more people began to adopt her simple practice. One by one, the villagers began to shift their thinking. They stopped waiting for perfect days and started finding joy in ordinary moments. They stopped chasing happiness and began creating it. The entire village started to feel different. Lighter, brighter. Not because their problems disappeared, but because they no longer let those problems define them. It was all thanks to one old lady who had learned, through heartbreak, struggle, and love, that true happiness comes from within. From the way you see the world, not the way the world treats you. And in that small village, people began to understand something powerful. Joy is not something you find, it's something you choose. As time passed, the story of Grandma Joy began to take on a life of its own. People started calling it the happiness habit. It wasn't something formal, no books, no rules, no meetings. Just a quiet understanding shared over fences, in the marketplace, during walks home from work, that happiness could be chosen, even in the face of pain. And what surprised everyone was how much this small mindset shift affected everything. One woman who used to complain about her husband now found herself laughing more, appreciating his little gestures, like the way he made her coffee, or the way he always brought firewood in before sunset. She still had problems, sure, but she no longer let them swallow the good moments whole. A farmer who struggled with failed crops year after year had almost given up on his land. But now, he started each day by noticing what was still growing, one healthy vine, one patch of rich soil. And that tiny spark of hope was enough to keep him going, to keep planting. The young man who had once visited Grandma Joy became a kind of mentor for the younger boys in the village. He didn't try to sound wise. He just shared what he'd learned, that life was going to be hard sometimes, but you could still choose how to face it. He told them, "It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about not letting the hard stuff blind you to what's still good." Soon, little things started to change in the village. People greeted each other more warmly. Strangers helped one another more often. There were more shared meals, more laughter in the streets, more patience during hard days. And the funny thing was, none of their problems had disappeared. People still got sick. Crops still failed sometimes. Arguments still happened. But the way people responded was different. They didn't run from pain. They didn't let fear or sorrow define their entire world. Instead, they faced it, and still looked for beauty, for hope, for joy. One day, a traveler came to the village. He'd heard rumors of this special place, where people smiled even through hardship. Where the air felt lighter, not because of wealth or luck, but because of something deeper. He asked around, curious. "What's the secret here?" He asked the baker, the schoolteacher, the old man fixing his roof. They all said the same thing in different ways. "We learned to see life differently, thanks to Grandma Joy." Eventually, the traveler made his way to her little cottage. She was sitting on her porch, a blanket over her knees, sipping warm tea. She welcomed him, just like she did with everyone. "I've heard people here are different," he said. "Happier somehow. Even during hard times." She smiled and nodded. "It's true," she said. "But we're not special. We just remember something most people forget." "And what's that?" he asked. "That joy," she said, tapping her chest, "isn't out there. It's in here." He looked around. "But don't people here still suffer like everywhere else?" "Of course," she said. "We just don't make suffering our identity. We allow ourselves to feel pain, but we don't stay stuck in it. We let ourselves grieve, but we also let ourselves heal." The traveler leaned in. "But how? What's the actual practice?" She chuckled. "It's simple. Every morning, before we do anything else, we ask ourselves one question: what is one good thing today? And we don't move on until we answer it. It could be the smell of bread, the sound of birds, the feel of a breeze. We anchor ourselves in that." The traveler scribbled it down in his notebook. "One good thing a day?" he asked. She nodded. "One good thing is all it takes to stop the darkness from taking over. Just one. And once you find it, you'll likely find more." That evening, the traveler sat by the fire at the village inn. He watched as a family played outside, as neighbors shared food, as laughter echoed from somewhere down the street. And he understood. This wasn't a village without pain. It was a village that had learned not to drown in it. He looked down at his notebook where he had written the old lady's words. "Happiness is not a prize life gives you. It's a habit you build, one small thing at a time." Before bed, he tried the practice for himself. He asked, "What is one good thing today?" And he smiled. "The stars are clear tonight." He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, he felt light. As days turned into weeks, the traveler stayed longer than he had planned. There was something healing about the rhythm of life in that little village, something unspoken, but deeply felt. He began waking each day with the same question: "What is one good thing today?" And without fail, an answer always came. Sometimes it was a child's laughter. Other times, a shared loaf of bread. Or just the quiet stillness of the morning mist. He started writing them down, one by one, like a collection of treasures. Over time, these small joys began to change him, not by removing his problems, but by softening how he held them. Eventually, it was time for him to leave. He said his goodbyes, packed his things, and walked up the hill that led out of the village. Before he left, he stopped one last time at Grandma Joy's porch. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed," he told her. She smiled gently. "You always had it. I just helped you see it." He paused. "I think the world needs to hear your story." She looked at him kindly. "Then tell it, not just with words, but with how you live. That's how stories last. That's how change happens." So he left, and true to his word, he began to share what he'd learned. He traveled from town to town, city to city, speaking to anyone who would listen. Not as a guru, not as a preacher, just as someone who had seen the power of choosing joy in a world that often forgets how. He told them about Grandma Joy, about the young man who had lost his way, about the village that changed, not through wealth, but through wisdom. He talked about the practice. One good thing a day. At first, people were skeptical. "That sounds too simple," they'd say. "That won't fix my problems." And he would reply, "It won't fix them, but it will change how you carry them." That's when people started trying it. One here, one there. And slowly, something amazing began to happen. A tired mother in a busy city began noticing her child's laughter again. A man who had been stuck in grief found peace in watching the sunrise. A college student overwhelmed by pressure found comfort in a quiet walk under the trees. And just like in the village, those small moments began to spread. Communities started to shift. Not because everything became perfect, but because people stopped waiting for perfect. They chose joy, right in the middle of imperfection. People began understanding a truth many had forgotten. That happiness doesn't come after the storm. It can exist within it. It's not something life grants you. It's something you claim, moment by moment, thought by thought. And in that simple shift, people became stronger. They became more grateful, more resilient, more alive. Back in the village, Grandma Joy continued her quiet life. She didn't know how far her story had traveled, or how many people it had touched. She just kept living the way she always had, waking each morning, stepping outside, and whispering to herself, "What is one good thing today?" Maybe it was the smell of wet earth after rain. Maybe the birds singing on her windowsill. Maybe the smile of a stranger passing by. One good thing. Every day. And through this practice, she taught an entire world what most people spend their lives chasing. That true happiness isn't a destination. It's a perspective. It's not about ignoring pain. It's about refusing to let pain be the whole story. It's about choosing to see, even when life is hard, that something beautiful still exists. And that no matter how difficult life may get, joy is still possible. Hope is still available. And happiness is still within reach.